Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to everyone. Welcome back to yours 2021. This will be our third plenary session for the conference. And so you are now in the Amethyst room for the health and lifestyle theme of the conference. And I'm really excited to be moderating my second session for the conference because we have three very interesting presentations in this session. This is the international room. So we have three of our friends and colleagues from overseas who are going to be presenting their very interesting research work. And I will introduce them all individually, one by one. And before I do that, I just want to remind everyone, and for those joining for the first time, each presentation will be given a half an hour, 30 minutes to present. And we will save the Q&A session for the end. So if you have any questions as you're listening to the presentations, feel free to write them in the chat box on the conference microsite. Okay, there's a chat box there in the YouTube live session. You can just type in your questions and I will collect them, and then we will moderate the Q&A session at the end. Okay, so just feel free to write questions as we go, or you can save them to the end. It's up to you. Okay, and our session should conclude by 10:50 at the latest. All right. So without further ado, I would like to get started. Let me introduce our first pair of speakers. Professor Dr. Su Ming To and his colleague, Mr. Alex Feng, from the Department of Social Work from the Chinese University of Hong Kong. They will be presenting their paper titled Civic Engagement, Social Support, and Sense of Meaningfulness in Life of Adolescents Living in Hong Kong. Okay, so without further ado, Prof. Su, the floor is yours, as we say.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Good morning. I have to wear a mask because just like Stephen said, I will be presenting with my PhD student, Alex. So Alex, please show your face and say hi. Okay. Okay, thank you so much for giving us such an invaluable chance to join this conference, because it is very exciting that we can hear different presentations about adolescent well-being and development. Today, we focus on young people's civic engagement in our presentation. Civic engagement, as you may know, is often mobilized by their. Civic engagement is often mobilized by young people's social networks and social connections, and young people also tend to make meanings in social networks and social connections. This is particularly important in Asian societies and East Asian societies because people tend to value their social relations and social connections very much. However, little is known about the moderation effect of social support on young people's civic engagement and their perceived meaning in life. So to address this research gap, we try to examine the relationship among civic engagement, different sources of social support. For example, social support from their family members, social support from significant others, and social support from friends, and how these interaction effects affect their sense of meaningfulness in life. There have been abundant research studies being conducted to examine the positive impact of civic engagement on young people, especially on their positive youth development and well-being. However, it is also found that youth around the globe face a trend of alienation from traditional civic and political engagement, which can be demonstrated by their low involvement in politics or low voting weight for young people. Recent studies on youth civic engagement in Hong Kong indicate a similar trend. For example, young people in Hong Kong considered themselves as having no political advocacy and not being effective or having little impact on changing the society. So the frequency of participating in civic engagement for young people in Hong Kong is not high, and the lack of political advocacy may affect young people's sense of meaningfulness in life, which has been found to provide purpose in life and facilitate the identity formation and positive development of young people. While some studies investigate the relationship between civic engagement and meaning in life, the interpersonal component of these two constructs seems to be understudied. What I mean is that the interpersonal component, which means social support and social relationships, social connections, can facilitate young people to pursue life meaning and engage in civic activities, which have been highlighted in Western societies in general and East Asian culture in particular. Also, little is known about the moderating effect of social support on civic engagement and sense of meaningfulness in life. That is why we want to fill the research gap and we try to examine the moderation role of social support. Our study is supported by the Public Policy Research Funding Scheme from the Policy Innovation and Coordination Office of the Government of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. And actually, we have just ended our research. This is the last day of the research. And the research period was from 2020 September, this is a data collection period, okay, to 2021 March. And after March, and we tried to analyze the data and write up the findings, and we have just submitted the report to our government. So research members, including me and Alex, I would just want to pass the time to Alex to present the other parts of the research. Alex, please.
Thank you. So hello everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. So actually, let me introduce our three key variables in our research. So in this article, the first key variable is the independent variable, which is the civic engagement. And our definition of the civic engagement is describe how active citizens participate in the life of a community in order to improve conditions for others, or to help shape the community's future. So there's this also emphasizes the social interaction within the communities. So this could illustrate the important role of the different support during civic engagement. So meaningfulness in life is our dependent variables. So what is the meaning of the meaningfulness in life? And we think it is the consciousness of orders, coherence, and also the purpose in one's existence, the purpose and attainment of worthwhile goal, and also a accompanying sense of fulfillment. So this is the definition of the our DV. So for the moderator, this is the social support. It is the resources provided by other persons, and also this is the process that individuals mobilize their social networks for materials and or psychological resources. That stressful events can be coped while social needs and goals can be met and achieved. Let's move on. Oh, sorry. Okay, so here comes our major theoretical argument. So in this paper, we try to argue that there would be an amplifying effect of perceived social support, which is from families, friends, and also from significant others on the relationship between the two constructs, which is the IV and also the DV. We base our research on the theory of relational empowerment by Kristen. So actually, this is a theory further developed the psychological empowerment theory of Zimmerman's. So in this theory, Kristen add relational components into the original model, and he contended that a sense of empowerment is divided from and exercised through social relationship, which can support the implementation of transformative power in the socio-political field. So according to the theory, the relational components of empowerment consist of 5 dimensions, which are closely related to an individual's social capitals and social support. And they are collective components, bridging social divisions, facilitating others' empowerment, network mobilization, and passing on a legacy. So in other words, civic engagement could be strengthened if participants' social connection is enhanced, or in other words, the relational components can facilitate others' sense of empowerment and meaningfulness. Actually, there are a number of studies that also provide evidence for the positive relationship between social support and the sense of meaningfulness in life. For example, there was a research by C and College studying the existential well-being in the United States. And in this study, they show that the sense of shared bond, which is linked to 4 dimensions of altruism, the family, friends, local, community, and also the entire. These are the 4 dimensions, and they can indirectly enhance people's existential well-being. So following the logic of the assumption, while the civic engagement can lead to an increase the sense of meaningfulness in life, the positive association of social support would affect the extent of perceived meaningfulness. So let me introduce our three levels of our research hypothesis. So for hypothesis 1, as you can see from the diagram, we expected the civic engagement would be positively associated with a sense of meaningfulness in life, which is of course the DV of our research participation. For hypothesis 2A to 2C, we expected the perceived social support from families, from significant others, and from friends would be positively associated with sense of meaningfulness in life of our research participant. So finally, the hypothesis of 3A to 3C, we assume that the perceived social support from all these 3 sources, which is again family, significant others, and friends, would moderate the more positive association between the IV and also DV, which they are of course civic engagement and also meaningfulness enough. Okay, so in order to examine also to test our hypothesis, a cross-sectional quantitative survey was undertaken, and we target the high school student because our previous research indicated that the ability to create meaning from civic engagement tends to emerge during middle and also late adolescence. So as you can see from the PowerPoint slide, we have adopt stratified random samplings. Initially, we wanted to invite the 10 school to participate. However, the response is not as good as we thought. So maybe that would be due to the impact of the COVID-19. So eventually we have to use another stratified purposive samplings. Actually, the school that we invite was based on their location, mediums of instruction, and religious deviation, and they serve as the starter. So in total, there's 6 schools participated in the study, covering all specified district of Hong Kong. So there were in total 1,330 valid questionnaire collected from the period. That was from 2020 October to 2021 March, and the research participant ranged from grade 10 to grade 12, and the response rate was 67.93%. So as you can see from the PPT, the slide, we used several different scales in our questionnaires. So for the in order for us to measure the IV, the civic engagement, we use the CES, that is the civic engagement scales developed by Doolittle and also Fall, which is aimed to measure people's civic engagement in their community. And we use the behavior subscale, which is 6 items subscaled with 7-point Likert scale. And that's resulted in a total score from 7 to 42 score. For our MV, which is the perceived social support, the multi-dimensional scale of perceived social support MSPSS, which is developed by Siemens and its college, was used. Actually, we adopted Chinese translated version of it by Charles indeed. So this Chinese translated version is a 20. It is a 12 items questionnaire with also a 7-point Likert scale, ranging from, of course, 1 to 7, with a total score from 12, excuse me, from 12 to 84. So finally, the sense of meaningfulness in life, which is our DV. Excuse me. We adapted the self-scales of MLQ, which is the meaning in life questionnaires, and we did not use the whole scales. We only use the subscale of the which is the present of meanings, which is this is developed by Stega and also translated by Chen. This scale is a 5-item scale with also a 7-point Likert scale as well. So besides, I mean, in addition to this, 3 IW, MV, also DV, we also consider others variables from the demographic data, which are based on previous research, and we try to include the age, gender, education level, religions, and also the education level of parents. So we move to our key findings. So let's look at some descriptive or demographic characteristics of our research participants first. So in this slide, as you can see from the table, once again, a total of 1,330 high school students were participated, and 55.9% were male, and also 46.1% were females. Among them, 21.1% was 15 or below, but the majority, 67.5%, were aged 16 to 17. Also, the average age is 16, as you can see from the table. So regarding to the education level of them, 25.2% were grade 10, 38.4% were grade 11, and also 38.4% was grade 12, and 69.9% of their fathers attend at least high school education, while 65.7% of their mothers reached the same level of education. So here comes the correlation table. So in addition prior to our hierarchical regression analysis, we conduct Pearson correlation analysis in order to examine the correlation among all variables studied, included the IB, ME, DB, and all demographic variables. And as you can see from the result, it provides a preliminary support for the hypothesis that the IB, DB, and also VMEs are significantly correlated. So only a religion will find significantly correlated with the DB, and so it was controlled in the regression analysis. So here is the result of the hierarchical regression analysis, which is the second phase of our whole study. So as shown in the table, statistically significant positive association between the IB, which is the civic engagement, and also the DB, sense of meaningfulness in life, is found. And this support our hypothesis 1. For hypothesis 2B and 2A and 2B are also supported as both moderator, which are the perceived social support from families and also social support from significant others, are found to have significant positive association with the sense of meaningfulness in life. However, hypothesis 2C, which assume perceived social support from friends, would be positively associated with sense of meaningfulness in life, were not supported, as there are no significance were found between the MV and DV. Oh, this one. So in terms of the hypothesis, so in terms of our, sorry, I accidentally moved the mouse. Okay. So in terms of our hypothesis 3A to 3C, their relationship are more complicated than expected. No interaction effect will find for support from families and also from support from significant others. However, very interesting. There is a significantly statistically significant negative interaction between the civic engagement and the perceived social support from friends. Actually, it's also indicated in this figure. So it is shown that the strength of the positive relationship between IB and also the DV become stronger for participants who has less perceived social support from friends than those who have better support. So in other words, the perceived social support from friends could mitigate the positive association between the IB and also the DV. So this is the whole table, but I think I don't have time to go over it. So we move to the discussion part. So actually, from our result, we found the positive association between IB and DB which is really consistent with our prediction based on the previous review of related study. The statistically significant and positive association of both variables could be explained by existing theory on meaningfulness in life. For example, human beings pursue for meanings, which is according to a theory by Baumeister, and the 4 meanings was purpose, values, efficiency, and self-worth. And civic engagement is about taking various collective action related to public issue and fulfill the purpose of improving condition and future of the community and others. So therefore, people who participate in civic engagement can meet at least 2 of the 4 needs for the meaning, which is the purpose and one also worthy finding could be reflected in our study is the importance of social relationship in Hong Kong context. As you can see, the hierarchical analysis indicated the civic engagement only accounted for 0.019% of the total variance of the DV, which seems to tell us that the Hong Kong student less of interest in participate in organized civic activities, and that would result in a low proportion of variance in their sense of meaningfulness in life, accounted by their level of civic engagement. The results also partially support the hypothesis of moderation effect on dependent variables. As you can see, the perceived social support from families and from others are found to positively associated with sense of meaningfulness in life with statistical significance. The findings of hypothesis 2A and 2B are consistent with the positive adolescent empowerment circle suggested by Chinman and also Lindy, because they contend that before students could become positively empowered, they should be bounded to a positive institution in society where they can find recognition and also positive reinforcement provided by adults. And this model actually could extended to not only cover adult in positive institutions, but to family members and also significant others. So our funding is also, however, our funding is quite contradicting, because it's contradicted to other existing research on the role of social support from friendship, which is very interesting. And we think that one of the possible explanation could be related to the two sides of the effect of friendship, because as good friendship can result in positive features such as encouragement. However, there are some negative features also can be found in a friendship, which is negative, such as a conflict with friends, engaging in rivalry, or etc., even between best friends. Therefore, when participants experience negative feature of friendship, they may not be able to create meaning in life, even though some positive effects of being engaged in friendship are present. However, further research should be performed to fully comprehend the relationship between the quality of friendship and meaningfulness in life. So finally, we look at this line and about our related to the hypothesis of 3A to 3C. And interestingly, we found too the proposed interaction effect, which is the social support from families and also the social support from significant others. They are both in statistically insignificant related to the DV. However, as you can find from the our result, we find that the social support from friends were negatively related to the DV, which is quite surprising. And that implies that an individual could find more meaning when engaging in civic action with casual or distant friends who may give less social support, with close friends who may provide more social support. So one possible explanation could be illustrated by Harris' socialization system theory, because according to Harris, the theory, when students engage in process of socialization, they tend to average their collected information to prototype that can be used to model to follow. However, that's why when they try to engage in the civic engagement with distant friends, they try to use it as the acceptable social norms of the society. Instead of providing normative framework, co-friendship in this provide a comfort zone where people feel less constrained by expectation of their close friend. So that could possibly explain the result of our research. That means when we work with casual friends in civic engagement, behavior of this different would set as norms and would be less flexible, leading to better commitment to the activity and a greater sense of meaningful in life. So thank you for all your attention. And this is all our presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Suming and Alex, for your presentation. Great timing too, by the way. The last second, you had it perfect. So Thank you very much. Very interesting study and interesting findings. I think, maybe some more exploratory work, qualitative work on the nature of those friendships that they're involved in the context of those civic engagement activities would be really interesting for further research. So we'll save our Q&A for the end. So please, if you have questions based on the presentation, please feel free to write them in the chat box. I will also jot down some questions for later. And now we will move to our second presentation. But first, let's take a quick break so we can get the second presentation set up. Okay, we'll be right back with you. Okay, thank you very much and welcome back. So now we're ready for our second paper presentation of this morning's plenary session. And I am pleased to introduce Associate Professor Dr. Maila Rahim, who's coming to us from UIN Sharif Hidayatullah Jakarta University. And she will be presenting her paper entitled Indonesian Youth Narratives About Their Learning Experiences, Learning and Living Through COVID-19 from the Onset to Over a Year Later. And once again, Dr. Maila will have 30 minutes to present. And please feel free to ask your questions in the chat box. Dr. Maila, it's all yours.
Thank you, Professor Latif. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, good morning everyone. I'll discuss my two research on youth narratives about their experiences learning and living through the COVID-19 pandemic in Indonesia during this presentation. COVID-19 has had a profound effect on the world and on people's life. The vast majority of countries responded to the COVID-19 pandemic by promptly implementing public health containment measures such as social isolation, travel restriction, border restriction, and school closure. In the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, 129 countries implemented countrywide school closure, affecting almost 63.3% of the world's students' population. Indonesia nationwide school closure began on March 23, 2020, affecting 60.2 million students and 2.3 educators at 425,451 educational institutions ranging from early childhood to the higher education. Courses shifted rapidly from face-to-face to online instruction, relying heavily on information and communication technology. These procedures were difficult to implement and generated numerous complications because a substantial proportion of the curriculum was not designed for online or remote learning and could also not be simply converted to online learning. Educators were largely unprepared for online learning or the utilization of digital resources. Students lacked the necessary gadget, internet connection, and other resources to study remotely online. And many students and educators were unfamiliar with the digital platforms and online programs they were asked to utilize on such a short notice. Sudden and drastic lifestyle changes resulting from COVID-19 measures have a detrimental effects on both the immediate and long-term quality of life and mental health. Social isolation, confinement, loss of freedom, and lack of autonomy have resulted in feelings of isolation, anxiety, melancholy, insomnia, and heavy alcohol and drug use, as well as self-harm or suicidal behavior. Numerous studies have discovered that younger people are more vulnerable to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, owing to their increased sensitivity and less efficient coping mechanism in comparison to older adults. Over a year later, some of the immediate and secondary implications of COVID-19 remain severe and unsettled, and some have morphed into greater problems such as poverty and inequality. Life has not yet been restored to normal pre-COVID-19 and may never do so. Due to their living situation, socio-spatial context, and the pandemic impacts on crucial social support networks such as caregivers, families, peers, and communities, young people in low and middle income countries are much more vulnerable to the pandemic. Also, university students have substantially greater rates of anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and disorder eating than the general population. Let me present my two research of adolescent narratives of their learning and living experiences during the COVID-19 pandemic in Indonesia. The first study was conducted at the beginning of the outbreak from April to June 2020, while the second one was conducted over a year later in June to August 2021. The first study employed a qualitative method of the phenomenological approach with 2 weeks of daily journals and reflective essays as data sources. This phenomenological study gathered and analyzed the first 3 months of lived experience of university students who had been forced to learn from home due to the COVID-19 crisis. 80 students who studied at Faculty of Education at a public institution in Jakarta participated in this study. The primary research question included: how was the learning process during the COVID-19 emergency remote learning? What did they like and dislike about the learning process? What kept them motivated? The second research followed a narrative inquiry strategy, eliciting data from participants through reflective essay. The sample comprised of the 166 undergraduates from the Faculty of Education enrolled at the same public university as in the prior study. The core study data included reflective essays about the pupil perceived effects of pandemic isolation on their mental health. Students were invited to write about how they felt and functioned during the pandemic. Each study involved 2 focus group discussion, following the second study reflective essay and the first study reflective essay and journal writing. The first focus group discussion was used to discuss the data analysis, while the second meeting served as a member check, during which the researcher delivered the analysis summary and asked for comments of any materials that needed to be amended, omitted, or added. Member checking contributed to the study increased accuracy, trustworthiness, and transferability. We examined the data using 2 distinct but complementary analytical approaches, thematic and narrative. Thematic analysis is advantageous for studying several examples and detecting commonalities and contrasts throughout, whereas narrative analysis successfully analyzes and contextualizes particularity. Thematic analysis began at a semantic level to ascertain surface meanings, whereas narrative analysis concentrated on the particular linguistic mechanisms employed in the stories conveyed. To conduct the analysis, we read and reread narratives carefully. We chose stories that fit a particular criteria, taking into account the study's purpose. Following that, we examined the narrative substance and attempted to discover recurrent themes in each story. We then clarified the initial conceptual categories within each narratives. Each narrative was coded individually, and then the data from the initial coding techniques was reconfigured and reanalyzed, categorizing codes that were identical or related. I arrived at summative we arrive at summative conclusion in the form of themes as a result of observing patterns in the classified codes. These themes becomes the study's finding. The regional closure of higher education in Indonesia has affected campuses in 34 provinces. This closure affects 4,670 higher education institutions, 8,043,080 students, and 294,000 lecturers under the Ministry of Education and Culture. In addition, there were 866 Islamic higher education institutions under the Ministry of Religious Affairs, with a total number of students and lecturers for whom no details are identified. Those 4,670 institutions of higher education spread across the archipelago. They are situated not only in urban cities, but in rural areas as well. And most of the institutions are still closed or still conducting learning from home up to now. The findings of the first study were published in 4 articles, while those on the second study were published in 1 paper, with 2 more paper forthcomings. The following are the findings reported in each paper. The initial research paper assessed the lived experiences of university students in Indonesia during the emergency remote learning, the first 3 months of the COVID-19. The data indicated 2 primary themes for the students' experiences, each with accompanying sub-themes. 2 themes and sub-themes were identified. First theme is blended learning, while the second one is paradoxical learning. Blended learning, which included e-learning, mobile e-learning, and conventional learning, and paradoxical learning, which included flexible and challenging learning. This paper concluded that students were engaged in emergency remote learning that incorporated a variety of techniques but lacked adequate resources and assistance, as well as lack of familiarity with the tools. Their reaction to the process were paradoxical as they encountered both positive and negative outcomes. They praised the flexibility of learning styles and times, but expressed reservation about unstructured classroom. The adaptation of studying independently from home, and various technological issues and costs associated with emergency remote learning technology. Several recommendations from this research in this paper included better preparing teachers and students for emergency learning, training lecturers on how to use blended resources, designing curricula that can be easily converted to online learning, developing student-independent learning skills, and providing access to diverse range of digital learning materials. The second paper of the first research focused on the technological limitation and challenges that the students encountered when utilizing information and communication technology during the COVID-19. Emergency remote learning. The paper added during the COVID-19 emergency remote learning. The paper identified several technological limitations and challenges as technology costs and a lack of technical skills. Additionally, students encountered difficulties with incompatible devices, sharing devices with other family members, and unstable internet connection, restricted or unavailable internet access, data costs associated with purchasing new appliances, new programs, or apps. In experience with ICT, a lack of ICT skills, and unsatisfactory learning platforms. The abrasive uncovered differences and shortcomings in how online learning has been implemented or not implemented in educational institutions. These scenarios highlighted how unprepared educational institutions were to deal with a crisis, exposing barriers to technology adoption and difficulties encountered by students and teachers when incorporating ICT. It is a dire warning and a call to action to adequately prepare for the unprecedented threat to education. The study recommended prioritizing the consequences of digital inequality in policy responses to COVID-19 vulnerability and responding that all students should have opportunities to continue learning. Utilizing less complex models that are more suited to location with patchy internet access, equipping students and educators with ICT skills and knowledge, expanding access to the networking network, and enabling schools to quickly alter curricula in emergency situation. The third paper from the first investigation examined what university students in Indonesia thought of the ERL created emergency remote learning created in response to the COVID-19 outbreak. The findings highlighted what students valued about learning from home during the COVID-19 crisis, which could be categorized into three main themes: flexibility and efficiency, self-care and self-development, and learning new technology. While their dissatisfaction were classified into three broad categories: a lack of organization, technological obstacles, and financial restraints. The article makes several recommendations for improving the quality of emergency remote learning and increasing students' readiness to study under any circumstances. Firstly, education via television and radio should be considered as an alternative in locations with limited internet connectivity. Secondly, equipping lecturers with standardized home-based teaching equipment and students with essential learning resources to facilitate online studying during the pandemic. Thirdly, to provide extensive training to teachers on the use of high-quality online teaching platforms that do not require a costly internet connection to function properly, so that they are better prepared to teach in any times of emergency. Fourthly, educational institutions must establish an online library to address students' concern about a shortage of learning resources. Fifthly, given the length of the COVID-19 crisis, it is critical to build distant learning centers within universities that can continue to grow after the COVID-19 pandemic is over. Finally, to promote and demand national level research on online education to discuss the difficulties identified and inform methods for successful online education during a crisis. The final paper from the first study observed how university students maintain their motivation to learn in the face of several constraints and hardship during the COVID-19 pandemic. The findings indicated that students' motivation to continue learning during the COVID-19 pandemic was oriented around three major themes, each with linked subthemes. The three themes and subthemes were as followed: personal, with subthemes of challenge, curiosity, self-determination, fulfillment, and religious commitment; social, with subthemes of relationships, inspiration, and self and other well-being; environmental themes with subthemes of facilities and conditioning. This study revealed that these developing adults were autonomously driven and committed to their studies on both an intrinsic and extrinsic basis. The majority of these pupils were motivated by their personal objectives, not by control motive, nor by a reward, a penalty, or a regulation. By describing how the students empower themselves, this study demonstrates the critical nature of the teaching students to be more resilient and building the ability to remain optimistic and motivated in the face of adversity. This is the first paper from the second study. I collaboratively wrote this research with Prof. Latif and Robin Ersing from University of South Florida. Two other publications are also currently in preparation, inshallah. This article examines how adolescents perceive their well-being following a year and a half of isolation during the COVID-19 pandemic. On this slide, you can see the codes and categories that we inferred inductively from the data, indicating the positive perceived consequences of the pandemic for the adolescents. While on this slide, you can see the codes and categories indicating the negative perceived consequences of the pandemic for the adolescents. The categories includes distress, uneasy, financial problem, social distancing, physical distancing, lonely, wary, sensitive, grief, frustration, family problems, perplex, thinking, and then contradictory feelings. Through inductive reflective thematic analysis, 7 themes expressing the youth perceived well-being were identified. First, the agony of loneliness and estrangement. Second, a state of brokenness caused by emotional agony and distress. Third, frustration, confusion, and anger. Fourth, the experiences of conflicting emotion. Fifth, uncertainty about the present and future. Six, a sense of purpose and fulfillment, and 7, turning to faith. Based on the findings and previous research, this study suggested several strategies for adolescent, family, and school prospering during extended lockdowns. First, enable young people to use the COVID-19 outbreak to redefine and deepen their sense of purpose in life. Secondly, to help adolescents develop proper coping skills and perseverance in the face of hardship. And then third, overcoming lockdown-induced stress and other pandemic-related mental health impact requires positive coping technique and personal resilience. Lastly, to foster an inclusive and warm family environment. Parents should check in with their children and help them overcome anxiety and despair by discussing the stress of social isolation, which can lead to help-seeking behavior. Another study that I conducted in parallel with these 2 studies is on the increase in child marriage during COVID-19. This study aims to examine what is causing the rate of child marriages to increase since the outbreak of COVID-19 in Nusa Tenggara Barat, eastern part of Indonesia. Using snowball sampling techniques, I selected 23 study participants, including 10 parents, 7 mothers and 3 fathers, with children who were married underage, and 13 adolescents aged 14 to 17 years old, 10 females and 3 males, who were married between March and December 2020. They come from 2 different regencies of Nusa Tenggara Barat, Lombok Barat and Lombok Utara. This study employed qualitative phenomenology as the methods of inquiry. Data was obtained through semi-structured in-depth interviews and analyzed in a 2-stage coding model. The result of the analysis were asserted on phenomenological themes. The data reveals that teenagers get married because, first, they believe that marriage is an escape from schoolwork, housework, and the stress and boredom of studying and staying at during the pandemic. And almost 70% of them are children, married children. The customary law is becoming the second reason of their marriage early. Some local custom encourage or permit child marriage. And the third reason is there is a lack of understanding of the impact and long-term implication of underage marriage. And then economic problems also becoming a reason. Financial problems trigger parents to marry the children at young age. And in our previous studies, it is also seen that in every disaster happen in Indonesia, child marriage number is increased. The influence of the surrounding environment and peers which encourage early marriage also becoming one of the reasons. The findings suggest a number of recommendations for the prevention of child marriage, the socialization of prevention of child marriage, offering alternative activities and support system for adolescents to overcome frustration and prepare to online learning and staying at home during the pandemic, and changing society's view that marrying children solves adolescent promiscuity, prevents pregnancy, and addresses the issues of non-marital pregnancy. The youth have been striving to adapt to new modes of learning and lifestyle changes. Their first challenges were primarily focused on adapting to new models of learning, utilizing new technology, and overcoming barriers posed by the use of technology. They retain a positive outlook on the situation and express gratitude for certain positive events that occurred during the health crisis. Additionally, the studies demonstrated that they maintain a positive attitude towards studying and made effective use of their personal, social, and environmental resources to navigate the stressful circumstances. However, they were still suffering from some of the conditions that existed due to the pandemic's outbreaks, such as technology restriction that continue to remain unresolved for some adolescents a year and a half later. Certain situations were deteriorating, such as unemployment rate, crime rates, and anxiety over when the pandemic will stop and life will return to normal again. These studies elicited authentic thoughts and experiences from young people using narrative rather than close-ended responded. These studies elicited authentic thoughts and experiences from young people using narratives rather than close-ended responses to survey questions, as many previous youth studies on the impact of COVID-19 had done. The study informed the family, community, and government about how adolescents overcome adversity and progress and best support them. Furthermore, we need to know which youth struggle and why, as well as which youth thrive. It is critical to understand why some adolescents adapt successfully to pandemic challenges while others do not. This could be next exploration. Identifying adaptive coping and resilience building a mechanism can inspire new approaches to improving adolescents' health and well-being. The research findings could not be extrapolated to a larger population since the sample consisted of a narrow demographic of adolescents. However, these studies uncovered critical information about how Indonesian youth have continued to learn and live despite the COVID-19 crisis, which could serve as a valuable lesson for the participants studied, the institution where they studied, and other communities with comparable background. And Indonesia is among one of the country with the most disaster in the year. So it is very important to prepare for emergency remote learning, not only for today and present day or near future, but also for a long term. As a follow-up, additional research should be initiated with students from diverse universities and adolescents from varying socioeconomic backgrounds and geographic location to hear more about how they experience and their perceived consequences of COVID-19. This concludes my presentation. Many thanks and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Maila, for your presentation and really just a significant body of research that you've been doing over the past 2 years on this topic of COVID-19 among adolescents in Indonesia. It's very interesting. An informal question: how do you find so much time to do research? Your research output is really amazing, and as a colleague of yours now as well, I know that all too well, how hard you work at your research, and it's really showing in your presentation some really interesting results. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to take another quick break to give us time to set up for the third presenter. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back everyone. Sorry for the slight delay. We're ready to proceed with our third and final presenter. And our third and final presenter is Associate Professor Dr. Miriam Aman from the Philippines. And she will be presenting her paper titled Motives and Constraints in After-School Sports Activities Participation Among School Youth, Contributing Factors in Developing Positive Youth Development Programs. So without further delay, I would like to invite Dr. Miriam to the floor. Doctor, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Latif, and to all the other presenters. Good morning. I'm sorry for that some technical delays of my presentation, but I hope everything will be good towards the end of this presentation of mine. All right, mabuhay, greetings from the Philippines. I'm sure you're quite familiar with my place. We're all in Asia anyway. So this morning, I'd like to share to you my research. With me is another lecturer from a branch university of mine from Naawan, and I am also from Marawi, from Mindanao State University. So the topic that I will be sharing to you this morning is on sports activity participation among youth, which I do believe that most studies on sports are presenting researches about youth in sports participation. This is very common among other researches, especially on my field. But however, this is also some of the topics that has been neglected by other practitioners to implement such kind of programs that will somehow develop more positive participations among youth and to give them more venues of life satisfaction and improvement, being a youth, being an individual, and being a good citizen of my country and your country as well. So this morning, I'd like to give you some backgrounds of my research, which we actually conducted, luckily, before the lockdown of all these issues in terms of pandemic. Next, please. All right. I am sure we are all familiar with sports activities, and sports activity participation, particularly among youth in our countries, in our community, and in our society, which we always consider that youth participation in sports are giving a lot of significance of life. And I do believe that in some part of our lives before, when we are still younger than today, we have been into sports participation as well. And we also do believe that there are a lot of positive impacts of youth, in sports participation, where we also have experienced those positive impact of participations when we also had those activities long before. And so among youth, sports participation have impacted a lot of contribution, and it emphasizes personal achievement in their self-promotion. And through sports participation, it gives them success and failure experiences wherein they literally win the game or they probably lose the game, and some sort and implication of their life accomplishments where they also have given motivation or somehow constraints in their participation. And also, it gives positive impact of their life into physical health, psychological enhancement, and stress reactivity, where maybe we have seen this one with our daughters, with sons, or probably members of our family, where we actually see them positive impact of their participation. But for the youth, most likely, they might as well have experienced a different thing with their participation in sports activities. And when this is also familiar to all of us, that sports, as we experience, I hope, that it reduces our stress, anxiety, and other positive impact of participation, and more likely also among youth who are in their adolescence, or probably as they rise up to a more engaging life in the society. Next, please. Okay, so more of this study, we consider that youth is actually some part of in our society's growing, or in our society's engagement, that should be given more attention, because as what our great hero have said, that they are actually the hope of our country. They are the hope of our society, of our nation. That is why we consider that sports participation among youth contributed really a lot of very significant values of being a citizen, and at the same time being a member of the society in everyone's place or country. And when in fact, among school youth, participation in sports activities contributed a lot of things in school performance, wherein they actually get higher grade. Some studies would have to say that they get a higher grade in sports participation. Through sports participation, they are more active, they are more engaging, they are more socialized, and they somehow give positive values in life and have a positive outlook in life if they are more active in sports participation. In which, among others, there might also some barriers, some impediments where participation in sports activities would not be also possible. Next. All right. Aside from youth active involvement in sports, there are two different group of people most likely among youth, whether they are engaging in sports activities, and some others are also being limited, being hindered, or they have a lot of constraints in this participation of sports activities. When in fact, this study is actually conducted in a school, considering their after-school activities, in which aside from their school tasks, school responsibilities, being a student, this study looked into the participation of the school youth after school activities. So we intended to float this research onto looking into how these particular students make use of their time after school, if they are still having time to do to do sports activities aside from their school works, or what actually motivated them or hindered or constrained them in their participation. So we look into this activity with this research, looking into these particular issues among school youth. Okay, next please. All right, just to give more ideas on other researches have said regarding the constraints of youth in their participation, wherein familiar, popular researchers would have to say that participation in sports give a lot of constraints to youth that would somehow include the lack of time among youth, especially considering that they are students, and some of them are not really motivated to participate because of some other issues. And then the inconvenience of other venues, other platforms of participation is also a constraint to them. And then they don't have they have lack of support, either from parents, from peer, or from the time itself, that they could not be give time other than being a student. And a famous researcher actually wrote that students or youth are limited with participation in sports because of a lot of internal and external barriers, blocking and inhibiting, that would emphasize more on the interpersonal, and structural constraints, in which this study actually looked into some form part of these barriers with the same research that have said in here. Next, please. All right, so to look into these particular areas, this study is conducted among school youth who are in one part of the Philippines. This is a a rural area of the Philippines, wherein it is a secondary school where there are 367 school youth who participated in the study, and 142 of them are from 15 to 17 years old, and there are about 18 to 20 years old who have about 225 of them, and there are 139 males and 228 females involved in the study. And this is composed of an instrument that we just floated in a way of identifying the constraints that they actually experience and the thing that motivated them to participate in sports activities. And some of the questions are on the demographics of their participation and also of the things such as their age and then their sex on partly of the demographics. Okay, next please. All right, so as you can see in here on the data, there are 248 participating member, those who are participating in school, in out of school youth or out of school sports activities. And there are 119 who are limited, who are not participating in sports activities after school. And as you can see also in the data, that there are sports activities that they stipulated. One of them and topmost of the activities that they participated is badminton, which is somehow become our individual and dual activities that most likely youth participated, because it is somehow can be played outdoor, though Filipinos don't have much of the luxury of having a lot of indoor facilities in terms with badminton, but for recreational purposes, we only play on the streets. And since this is just about sports activities participation, not in a competition, so most of the Filipinos just play badminton outside, especially if it is not for competition purposes. And also basketball, which is we considered somehow among Filipinos as one of the things that we can be of a national game nowadays, because most of the youth play basketball. And the rest of the games that the youth participated are volleyball, athletics, soccer, or the football as others call it, and some other are table tennis, chess, swimming, lawn tennis, and sipak takraw. Some of the youth actually participated in individual and in dual sports because it is played by just few people involved, and some are modified sports wherein facilities and equipment of the sports are not actually the issue, just for the sake of participation. And so the youth also participated more time on, or not regularly, only few participated every day, and most of the youth participated once a week only. So with their participation, we can already see that it is not a usual or a regular basis of participation, because most, as you can see on the data, that more of the youth just for participating in once a week. All right, next please. So the next presentation or the next data that I'll be presenting to you, the succeeding slides will be on the motives and the constraints, why and how or why the youth are motivated or not motivated, or they are being constrained in their participation. So the youth who participated actually identified 5 factors why they are motivated to participate in in sports activities after school. So those youth stipulated about skill development. So the first 2 on the table, as you can see, that there are 2 things. The first 2 stipulated that they are participating because of skill development. It is apparent, however, that when we participate in sports, as we in ourselves as well, we wanted to develop our skill. The same with the youth, that they are also wanted to develop their skill. And most likely these youth are more into sports participation or sport activities, wherein they can be an athlete in the school, That is why they are motivated to participate even after school, because they wanted to develop their skill, in which in this particular area, other researcher would also have said that developing skill in sport through sports participation would really give them more positive impact in their lives, even not speaking about sports, because life skill could also be developed through participation in some other areas of sport activities. And the other factor also the youth stipulated is they feel good when they participate in sports activities, to say, and in a way that they develop satisfaction, which actually contributed a positive outlook in their life, because when they feel good, they are more motivated either to study or to help household chores or to even communicate and to socialize with other friends and peers in the society or in their school. And through having that feeling of good, they can also have a emotional stability where they speaking well, they have a good communication with their peers and also with some other member of the society. Okay, next. All right, and other also factor that the youth stipulated is they are motivated to participate because they wanted to make friends or new friends. Yes, it is apparent that when we do sports activities, the same with the youth, they also wanted to gain new friends, and this is form part of a socialization purposes in which we cannot do away as well. That when we participate, we always have to talk, we always have to socialize with other people who are in the playing field, in the venues, or even among those who they did not meet yet, or those people that they just make an encounter at the moment they are in the playing field or in the street, however, because we are also playing games in the street only. All right. So with making new friends, it also make them part of the society. They make it a part, they belong to the group by having that new friends that they able to socialize. They make new look how they perceive other people's views in life, and they also have gained that positive values from other people. And also another factor that the youth mentioned is for them to get fit. Okay, it is as well evident that participation would give us health factor contribution, wherein if we sweat out, we give time to exert our forces, our muscles, and our tissues, we as well feel fit, get fit, and then we exerted a lot of physical and health issues with our body. And also the same thing that the youth are feeling, in which when they participated in sports activities, they as well get fit, and then they make it as a way of their goal that when they participated in in sports activities, they as well feel relaxed. Anxiety issues are being somehow lessened and taken away, and to look into another task in school, wherein from that day, they as well get a lot of things that make them refreshed, renewed, and somehow the stress are being relieved. So getting fit would give benefit to the youth, wherein the next day, as they look forward for another school activities, they feel renewed and to look for more other opportunities to participate in school activities, because they have that positive values and positive impact in their lives through participation. All right. But however, next slide. Aside from those youth who are motivated to participate, there are also others who are constrained to participate. As the data have said, that there are 119 of the youth who did not have participation opportunity because they are also constrained in many things. As you can see on the presentation, one of the first one that the youth emphasized is about parents' permission. So they somehow emphasize that they are constrained to participate because their parents, part of their family, would not allow them to participate in sports activities, particularly after school. Because it is still a typical issue among Filipinos that once we are, because I am part of this tradition, that once we are done with our school task, we ought to be at home to do household chores, to help with the parents' household, to help taking care of the family, to help with the responsibility in the house, wherein after school sports activities is no longer of our concern. So we just have to lay it off and to do things that will benefit for the whole family. And it is already part of our luxury when we have time to participate in other sports activities aside from household chores. So for the youth, especially, parents' permission is very necessary for them to be out of the house to participate with friends and to go out with friends, because as youth, they are expected to be at home after school. So that's one of the biggest issue among youth, that they could not participate because of the parents' permission. Okay, next slide. And the next issue is about academic requirements and a lot of extracurricular activities of the school. That is why they just let go of participation in other things that they do aside from school tasks. So instead of joining friends to go for a recreational activities in terms of sports participation, they are limited to do it and they're constrained to do it because they are still thinking of their academic requirements. They're still thinking of the things that the school required them to do for the following day. So instead of probably wasting their time into other sports activities outside school, you'll just have to devote that time doing another school requirements for the following day. So that also gives constraints among youth not to participate after school sports activities. And that actually give them more stress and anxiety to look for another day, for another school works to do, and without thinking the positive impact supposedly of participating after school sports activities, aside from not thinking the sports, the school requirements. And the other thing is the health condition. Okay, there are still a lot of Filipinos society that once they are having special needs, they are actually limited as well to go out of the society because they feel insecure, that instead of joining with other peers or other youth, they just tend to stay at home. Sorry. So sorry for that. Just something came in. All right. So health condition, as I have said. All right. So among youth, as I have said, that they actually limit themselves as well to participate because of some health condition. All right. So we just prefer to stay at home rather than being with friends because they don't like to be bullied, however. And they don't like to get some other feedback from other friends outside the houses. Okay, next slide, please. All right. And some other issues that the youth have mentioned also is a waste of money. Okay, I could have also personally considered that Filipinos actually don't spend much time to participate in after-school sports activities because they somehow think that it is a waste of money, in which, especially if sports participation would entail for money issues to pay for the rentals, for the equipment, and for the facilities, they don't like to pay for that. Filipinos are more fun to participate if it is for free. So if it is with payment, other than that, Filipinos don't like anymore, especially for those who are in a rural areas wherein they don't like to spend money for that. So they actually would restrain and constrain themselves to participate. And the last issue or the constraint that the youth would actually stipulated is on the fringe issues, wherein they are constrained to participate because of social factor, and they don't have friends to participate with. They don't like to go out of their houses alone, and also being with friends or without friends as they participate would not give them more fun, would not motivate them. So especially if it is already after school and without any companion would give also restriction or constraint among the youth. Okay, next slide. So with this one, the study would actually have to say that in order to give more impact to youth, it is, however, implicated that a sports program should be included in positive youth programs in such a way that youth will be given more attention and more value in the society, because as we all know that we are the hope of our country, in which this study considered that motives and constraints shall be addressed in identifying programs for the youth, and constraints shall be given more attention, because although the study emphasizes that there are more youth who participated, but not to neglect as well the constraint issues that other youth have encountered, in which this study would consider that there should be an action plan and sustainable programs to be given for the youth in such a way that those who are constrained to participate will be given a lot more time to consider that sports participation would actually give them a lot of values to become a good person, to become a better person in the society. And as well, next slide. This also considered that sports activity participation is only one of the venues for the participants, for the youth to participate. And with all these issues of the technological issue in our society now, that the youth are more into more into computer for technology, playing on the games, and then neglecting the value of participation into physical output is somehow neglected by the youth. So this study actually has a strong conviction that the implementation or the creation of programs that will include sports-related activities that will open more opportunities for youth should be provided in such a way that the positive contribution for youth development is evident, and should also be considered as more areas for the development of a person to become a good person and has a well-being to be in the society and to be a good citizen in our own countries. All right, so for that, thank you very much, and my apology for that inconvenience, for that.
Thank you, Dr. Marian. I think it was interesting is as you were talking about health outcomes, you started to cough and you had to step away. So it was kind of ironic that
Yeah, I'm so sorry for that.
it was almost like you timed it that way. But no, of course. We're glad to see you're okay, of course. All right, so thank you very much for your presentation. Another very interesting paper on youth development and sports in the Philippines. So now we will just step away for a couple minutes while we get set up for the question and answer session. So please don't go away and stay with us, and we'll be right back. Okay, welcome back, everyone. So now we will have our question and answer session, and I will moderate the session. I will first refer to your questions in the chat box from the microsite, and then if there is additional time, I will maybe pose a question or two from myself. So we will start, for the presenters, I've added the questions in the chat box on our Zoom, so you can read them there. So this first question is for Dr. Mayla from our UPM PhD student Mariam Tobias. Dr. Mayla, gadget and internet connection are essential to support emergency remote learning. Your data is valuable to be used for policy making as well as to persuade more privates to invest. After 1.5 years of research, how do you see the commitment from the government and the private sector in order to provide assistance in terms of better internet connection and gadgets?
Okay, thank you, Prof. Latif. I will answer right away now. Okay. Spatial inequality is an incredible common phenomenon in developing countries, including in Indonesia. Purbo, Indonesian researcher in 2018 reported that most internet users in Indonesia reside in the country's western region, especially in Java, where internet connectivity has reached 36.9% only. And then Wilantika in 2019, just before the COVID-19 outbreak, used the digital divide index developed by Husing and Selfoher to calculate and quantify the digital divide that occurred in 34 Indonesian provinces. The results suggested that there was only one province with low digital divide rates. And you know, it's Jakarta again, the nation capital city. 19 provinces with medium digital divide rates and 14 provinces with high digital divide rates. Provinces with a higher digital divide are not clustered in one island. However, it does typically occur in eastern Indonesia and outermost provinces and districts. And Indonesia is, for the digital inequality, Indonesia is quite complex because we are archipelagic country, which is separated by islands, and we have 13,000, more than 30,000 islands. Well, 7 big islands, and then the rest is small islands with occupants. And students in this research are studying at Jakarta-based university. Most returned home because the campus was closed. Nevertheless, their homes are mainly located in Jakarta and surrounding area. The remaining small minority reside in other places. Students staying in Jakarta, there was still a large proportion that complained about unreliable internet access. You may see in my slides, my students studying just in the road because there is a good connection. And I also took a picture from the Google, how Indonesian student should study on top of the tree to find a connection. And what the government has done, in order to provide more opportunities for students and lecturers to access the internet during remote learning during the COVID-19, the Ministry of Education, Culture, Research and Technology in 2000 and 2021 has distributed assistance of 6.8 8 trillion rupiah, or 475 million US dollar, which intended for 26.8 million students to, and then university students, teacher and lecturers to buy internet data. Free Wi-Fi provided by local or provincial government. School digitalization program also developed by the government. For example, there are some apps for students to learning from home, and then digital learning resources, and then the government also distributing tablets and gadget. But again, it's a very complex. It's not solved easily. For instance, for the internet connection, because what I said is about we are archipelagic country, so our people are widely distributed around the islands, and not all islands has actually internet connection tower. So the governments continue to develop more towers, so more internet access could be well distributed to our people. And also you can see also that how the government also provided us, for example, lecturers, with some application subscription. For example, we have a free Zoom access, free and then some additional programs from the Google apps and etc. But again, because of the biggest number of the population, and also the spatial disparity, this problem is not easily solved. And also in Jakarta itself, internet connection is not always stable, and it's quite costly for many people to have that access. So I can say that the government had done a lot of stuff, but and also the private sectors, because you may know that our Minister of Education is an ex-COA of Gojek. Gojek is like a Grab in Asia. It's well, he is a very technologically aware person, and he developed application for making our life easily, with providing Gojek or the right to us to buy food and etc. using the application, like a Uber Eat or like Grab Eat, possibly in Malaysia. But and also the government, the private sector also helped the government by providing like extended internet outreach, and also provided tablets, gadget for the students. Still, I had a chance to talk with the teachers 2 weeks ago. It's early childhood teachers, and they talk about how it's not easy for other level of education to have to utilize internet or ICTs, based on, because well, in the university or the middle schools, you can just transform learning from home easily. But for younger children, for example, those in early childhood education, and also those in elementary school, is not easy. It's not only about the internet outreach, but also the availability of the gadget at home. And also because the teacher itself is not very familiar with the use of the internet. And the government also support the teachers with some training. But again, it's not completely solved. But we can see that there is a progress happening in the last 1 year, actually, because at the beginning of the COVID-19, that's why we use the term of emergency remote learning, because everything were not available. But for now, we are transforming our education to be more digitalized, and it puts a lot of effort to everyone to be involved and to work on this issue. I hope I answer your question. I saw your question in YouTube, but I cannot answer because I need to, yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Myla, for that response. So I can imagine with in Indonesia just the overall size and the geographic challenges and the socioeconomic challenges. It must be a tremendous overall challenge. I mean, to undertake this transformation in education. So I'm sure it's going to take time. Thank you for the question, Mariam. So the second question we have from the participants is for Dr. Miriam. And the question is, based on your research, Doctor, how does the Philippines government encourage youth to be active in sports?
All right. Thank you. There are actually a lot of sports programs. It is school based. It is local based, coming from our local government units. But we also have this kind of a problem because we are also composed of islands, just like in Indonesia, and we are in Mindanao. So most likely, in terms with programs coming from the nationals, we don't have that much of access, opportunity to get a lot of programs coming from the nationals. And it is also a sad reality that most of the programs, particularly for the youth, are seasonal, and especially when it is a program coming from the local government, it is sometimes I don't like to say, but it is sometimes connected with some political issues that it is conducted and it is given in the community or in a particular place in a municipality when election is approaching. So there are a lot of activities coming out for the youth, sports programs, and the like, especially if elections are coming. And that is to boost the campaign process of one politician and to the other. But in terms with school-based programs, there are a lot of activities that are given, but because of the mandate of each school to give more priorities of the academic issues, that school activities such as sports would be given also during seasonal process or implementation. And since the study is more of the after school youth activities, in that way, in this particular area or setting of the research, there are no much of after school youth sports activities given coming from the government of the Philippines, because more of the activities are given school-based or sometimes coming from the local government unit. But yeah, just to say that it is more of a political issues factor. And sometimes we are also feeling that issues on some implementation, misconduct of activities, that the budget per se for that particular program are not given much more emphasis to those programs. So it is still a sad reality and a great challenge for us, especially who are on this field of sports and giving more values of the youth in participating. That is why we are feeling challenged to do more things for those aspects that will give more development for the youth. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Marian. So I think some familiar sounding issues there, especially related to the role of politics in providing programs and so forth. We've heard some of those things here in Malaysia as well. There's a follow-up question from Mariam, Dr. Marian, since you're on this topic. She said the trends of sport participation are decreasing in recent years, and one of the challenges is the advancement of technologies. In your point of view, how can PYD, Positive Youth Development, be advocates in sports-based or for sports-based programs in terms of facing this challenge of the advancement of technology and esports and things like that?
Yeah. As I have said, this is really a big challenge, a greater challenge, especially on our field as physical educators, because the rising of all the technological thing nowadays really corrupted all the minds of the youth, that most of their times are already on the games, the e-games, and even I also feel discouraged because there are already a lot of sports-minded people who are also buying the ideas of e-games, that are giving more emphasis of e-games into sports, which personally for me, I still don't feel like it. I still feel discouraged about it, because implementing e-games into sports would actually did not give more development to the individual, in which for me how to do it is just more on advocating more positive values coming from to my end. I have to start with a school base because I am in the university, and to give more emphasis of programs that will give more opportunity for the youth to participate. This is, I consider this as a great challenge. This is not an overnight process of developing these particular issues, because we are just a small entity of making this development from a school, rather than conquering the world views of technology. This is a great challenge for me. But however, from our very own little way of doing advocacies, doing a lot of programs, considering the pandemic issues, we are all limited as well to do programs face to face. But hopefully, as we will be going back to our normal business in the school, then I also felt obliged to do a lot of programs for the youth, in such a way that after all the pandemics, I'm sure they all feel the necessity to be involved physical activities. That is why, for me, is more on providing a lot of programs for positive youth development in the future.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'd like to shift gears a little bit and pose a question for Professor Suming. Prof, your research was your presentation was very interesting, and the fact that you are studying meaningfulness in adolescence is something that I'm personally very interested in, and I think it's also something that's very much related to all the presentations today, because I think scholars in youth development would, I think, pretty much agree that globally we have this sort of crisis of meaningfulness and purpose among a lot of our young people. So I'm just curious, what made you, from the perspective of Hong Kong, what made you choose that as a sort of outcome to study? And the other question I have is, how were you able to convince local government to fund that kind of a study? Because usually governments are not interested in things like meaningfulness. So if you could just answer that, that'd be really great. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Actually, one of my research areas is about the meaning construction of young people in Hong Kong. Why am I interested in this research area? Because nowadays, for many young people, they just cannot find the purpose in life, just like what Stephen said. For example, they are studying, but don't know why they want to study. For example, maybe they are playing some sports, but because of their fathers and mothers want them to do so, learn some musical instruments, playing some sports in order to go to a better school, but they don't know why. So my interest is to try to figure out what aspects can facilitate the meaning, development, and construction of young people. And the second question is about how can I convince the government? Actually, I guess because I was one of the members of the Youth Commission of the Hong Kong government previous years ago, and we have some discussions about the meaning development or meaning construction of young people, and the government do know that the problem or the issue that some young people cannot find their meaning in life, so they try to develop many different kinds of programs. Actually, there was a very large-scale program about positive youth development called PATH, okay, running for several years before, to try to encourage more young people to pursue their meaning in life, as well as to achieve positive development. And then another large-scale program funded by the Jockey Club Charities Trust is called CLAP, C-L-A-P. It is also about a life development program. And why do we fund the government or the non-government funding organization support these programs? Because they really try to encourage more young people to use different means. As I said, meaning construction is a outcome, just like what Stephen said, but can be through different means. For example, through formal education, as well as through non-formal education. Actually, I also see a common point between the second and third presentation, which is because of the COVID-19, the learning patterns change a lot. However, how can we facilitate the young people, no matter in formal learning in schools, just like the second presentation about the learning experience, as well as sports participation, which is, I guess this is a kind of non-formal education. How to facilitate young people to have positive development through the changing learning patterns. And we do also want to use different means to enhance the meaning construction of young people. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Interesting. Dr. Maila, in terms of the research that I was involved in a little bit with you, which also focused very much on meaning, because I think one of the things that we've heard from the presentations today is, when faced with things like a pandemic, of course, everybody sort of asks those kinds of big questions, right, about things like meaning in life and purpose and all those things. In terms of your research on child marriage, which I was interested to learn about at the end there, are there any studies, have you come across any studies that have actually shown the effects or the negative effects, positive, whatever the effects are of child marriage?
Yes.
And has that influenced your desire to do the study that you are planning?
Yes, there was some studies on the prolonged effect or the impact, a long impact of the child marriage. Well, it's impacted the health and also impacted the education, the future of the young, those who married young, and it becomes my concern because the case in Indonesia is quite different from the case of child marriage in other Muslim countries. For example, in Pakistan or in Bangladesh and in African Muslim countries. Why? Because in those countries, child married those much older adults. Young girls married older adults.
Oh,
But
okay.
in case of Indonesia, in recent years, during this pandemic, the case is children married children. Why? One of the findings shown that because of boredom and then also exhausting of remote learning, they see marriage as an escape to stop the homeworks from school and the house chores from the parents. And the data shown also, because from the interview, that the girls, I interviewed girls and boys who married between I forgot the date, but it's at the end of 2020. So they said that they married. The girls said that they married because they are overwhelming with the house chores given by the parents at home, because they should take care of the siblings. They should go to the fields, help with the house chores, and then they have a lot of homework, and they don't have internet connectivity. And then one time in my class, my students, her father was just yell in the class and said that, "What you doing? You are just in front of the computer." It's showing that for girls, they should do some host chores, not only just sitting and doing class. But then it's becoming a very concern, because I continued this study. The first study about the child marriage is in Nusa Tenggara Barat, which is in the eastern part of Indonesia. But I just finished conducted study and got data from Jakarta areas. And also it happens, children married children. Children here is those under 18 years old. Well, the government made a policy now, those married below 18, they should have permission from their parents to get married, but it doesn't stop because they can they can send they can ask for termination of the requirement to get married if there are some cases. And the civil office in Indonesia for Muslim, they married in religious offices, and they recorded more than 300 times increase of parents asking for dispensation for their children to get married. So we can see that, and also in the paper I discuss about, children married adult, it's a problem because for the continuity of the economic in the family and also their mental well-being. But married children, I believe it will create more problems, especially both are not mature enough to start marriage. And in Nusa Tenggara Barat, the cases is married at the age of 13, 14. And the reason is too simple, just saying that because they don't like online learning and they just want to escape from school.
Right.
So that's why I saw this as a concern as an educator, and to see it from the perspective of educators, how we actually could make our students to stay at school, and how school actually facilitate these teachers, these adolescents to study with all the limitation during the pandemic.
Right. If I may, you may want to consider some sort of cohort study and follow some of these couples, over time, and just see what happens. It would be a fascinating study, I think, to look at the outcomes of those marriages. But yeah, it's really interesting work. Okay, so there's another question from Mariam for Dr. Su. Do you have plans to conduct further research to explore the role of social support from friendships of adolescents living in Hong Kong based on your current research findings?
We do, yeah, because as I said, our previous focus is on civic engagement and winning in life. But then we found the interesting findings of peer support or friendship support. Actually, I think we can have two directions. The first one is about the positive sides and negative sides of peer support or friendship support, because actually we have conducted some qualitative focus groups, but because of the time limit today, we cannot present the findings of our qualitative studies. From the focus groups, some young people told us that there are many arguments or even conflicts in Facebook or other social media with their friends, because as you may know, in Facebook you can say what you want to say, okay? Right. Because in face-to-face, we will be more polite, but in Facebook, or you can say what you want to say. And there are many conflicts with their friends because of their different points of view on different things. So at that moment, maybe the peer support or the friendship would not give any positive support to young people, but it can be a form of cyberbullying, right? So this is the first direction. The second direction, because our findings show that if the friends are too close, it cannot facilitate civic engagement and meaning in life. But if the friends are more distant, for example, the friendship obtained from some association, because we find that many young people do not participate in any kinds of youth associations, so they cannot obtain the associational social capital from these associations. So I want to pursue our study to explore the experience in those youth associations, which can facilitate the positive youth development through the more so-called distant friendship, but that they have a common goal in that kinds of association. Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, I was kind of curious. It didn't hit me right away when Alex presented that finding about the closeness of friendships actually detracting from their civic engagement. But the way you explained it just now, I get it now. And in fact, in reflecting on some of my own personal experiences with young people, I can understand it. Even in the case of families as well that are extremely close, the young people, they feel their needs are met. They don't need to sort of have those external social capital networks to feel fulfilled. And again, your study is all about meaningfulness. So maybe they just don't have that need. So that would be another, I think, really interesting route for exploration on
Exactly.
that topic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Because the bondage is too strong for some young people with their family members or too close
Yeah.
friends. Yeah.
Right. That'd be interesting to find out. Well, we've been given the warning, the 5-minute warning. So I think we have time for one more quick question. I don't think there's anything in the chat box. So I'm just going to ask. Maybe I'll just ask Dr. Marian one last question. Dr. Marian, I noticed that in your list of barriers, there was nothing about personal interest. And I'm wondering if why that was that conscious that you left that out, or was there a reason for not including that? Young people just not having an interest in sports as a barrier.
Based on the result, doctor, the youth actually did not emphasize more on the barriers as to
Okay.
personal. Yeah, it's more of the coming from the social factor, from the family, and for some health reasons, but not
Nice.
much of the personal issues.
Okay, all right, yeah. And do you see, I mean, maybe not even from your study, but maybe just from your knowledge in general there, do you see esports as a real competitor to physical sports there in the Philippines?
Yeah, for me, because considering that Filipinos are more into laid back attitude, wherein they prefer to do activities with their comfort at home
Yeah,
than going out. So I could have say that a lot. This is becoming a problem nowadays among youth, that parents are complaining, even in our faculty in our university, that they are complaining that their children, particularly among youth, are more into gadgets even at the wee hours of the morning.
right.
That I could say that it is really a real competitor in a real sports setting, the esports.
Right. Yeah, we definitely, I definitely think more research is needed in that area, especially in this
Yeah.
region. Yeah. Well, great. Well, thank you very much to all of our presenters and your wonderful research that you're doing. And as we can see, there's so much more that we can do. A lot of future directions here that came out of the discussion. And thank you to the participants for posing your questions and for being with us today. And so I think we will just close by saying thank you very much.
Thank you.
And wishing
Yes,
everyone
thank
the
you.
best with your work and in the future. So I think that concludes our session. Thank you. Jumpa lagi. See you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum.
Thank you.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.